All right, what's up? What's up? What's up? Hope everyone is good. Listen here. My last video I did was about James Brown, right? And my goal was to ultimately prove that Give It Up, Turn It Loose had nothing to do with Latin culture. And I'm sure I proved that. Now, this particular video, we're going to deal with some B-boy anthems, all right? And once we investigate these B-boy anthems, because it's alleged by Dr. Cologne that the B-boy anthems include the Descarga and the Latin breakdown. In other words, he's basically saying it's related to Latin culture. This is his way of crowbarring his way or trying to crowbar his way into our culture. But I'm not going to allow that to happen. So we're going to look at a few of these B-boy anthems. So before I go into this more into depth, let's listen to what Cologne has said in the past.
I like that. So now, once again, if we were to just deal with the breaks only, who created the breaks? And more importantly, who created the music that made the break possible?
What breaks are you talking about?
No, you tell me. You're the doctor, because you're saying that breaks was multicultural. So I want to hear this multicultural break beats.
Right, the foundation of the break beats, which they were just simply.
Let me stop it right there. Now, I know you guys heard that before, but I want you guys to focus on that word foundation. Foundation means that it's everywhere as part of the music. All right, let's go on.
Flash, Bambada.
Let me go back.
What breaks are you talking about?
No, you tell me. You're the doctor, because you're saying that breaks was multicultural. So I want to hear this multicultural break beats.
Right, the foundation of the break beats, which they were just simply records that DJs played. And yes, they were African American groups. But let's look at this for a minute. Okay? Where did they get? So Herc, Flash, Bambada, Theodore, Mean Gene, these DJs played specific breaks that had a specific sound in the breaks. Okay? And these were breaks that were catered to the B-boys. And the B-boys danced to a specific sound in the breaks. We call it the Latin breakdown. Okay, so with it.
Okay, so now you hear that description. He was clear that had a specific sound and it was catered to the B-boys, and he called it the Latin breakdown. So he's talking about all the B-boy anthems, according to him, have this Latin breakdown. Now, what if I told you that many of these B-boy anthems are not related to Latin America at all? That would be the end of the discussion. But I guarantee you, after I prove my point today, he will still make that allegation. Let's go on.
In these breaks, you hear the conga drums, you hear the bongo drums, you hear timbales, you hear the cowbells. It is the Latin breakdown that you hear that comes from. Okay, those instruments don't come from foundational Black Americans. They come from Africa and the Caribbean.
Now, isn't it amazing? He credits Africa, where the instruments come from, but do you ever hear him acknowledge them in terms of hip hop? It's always the Latin community. He never acknowledged them in terms of hip hop. I want to play another audio clip of Dr. Cologne when he was on his platform. He was with Adrena, and they had this conversation that was crazy. So he lays out this premise about what the B-boy anthems were and what they were not. So let's listen to that, and we're going to discuss it.
Listen. I want to make this clear. This is never to say that those dancers, the Nicholas brothers, the dancers in the Mills Brothers video, those dancers were phenomenal dancers. Nobody is taking that away from them. What we are saying is that when you listen to the music that they are dancing to, it is not the percussive breaks that is known to have brought in the B-boys. The B-boys dance to one specific sound. That is the percussive drum breaks. Okay, with all those instruments in there. Now, are there breaks that don't have congas in them all the time? Yes. Are there breaks that don't have timbales in them all the time? Yes. Of course there are. But the majority of the anthems that we know, and this is what I'm saying. So here are the anthems.
Okay. So now he says that all the anthems, there are some anthems that don't have this percussive drum sound or the Latin breakdown that he's talking about. So remember I told you guys to hold on to that word foundation? Because that's a very important word. Let's define what foundation or foundational is. Forming the base from which everything else develops. So when you think about the break beats, and you think about all these other instruments that are, participating in a breakbeat, what is the foundational instrument that's in the breakbeat? It's the drum kit. Everything else layers above the drum kit. So if you already acknowledge that every song doesn't have those congas or bongos or cowbells or timbales, then you're acknowledging that those instruments are optional. They're not necessary for the breakbeat to take place. So to try to suggest that they're foundational clearly shows that you are misrepresenting the truth, because clearly if it were foundational, they would appear in every B-boy anthem, just like the drum kit does. Now, Charlie Rock appeared on his platform a few months ago, and he laid out what the B-boy anthems were. If anybody knows, he knows. So let's listen to Charlie talk about that.
About the songs that were played. There were main B-boy songs.
Give us some of those songs.
Sex Machine, James Brown, Give It Up, Turn It Loose. Jimmy Castor's Just Begun. Shaft in Africa. The Mexican. Which is a white group.
Right.
They're a white rock band. Babe Ruth.
Right.
The Dynamic Corvairs, Funky Music is the Thing. Dance everybody. That's there are others.
Yeah, Yellow Sunshine was one. Apache, obviously.
I love Yellow Sunshine. That's my jam.
Yeah, Yellow Sunshine.
Listen to Me by Baby Huey.
Listen to Me, yeah.
Apache, of course, everyone knows Apache.
Yeah. And that's what I mean.
All right, so that's a preliminary list of the B-boy anthems. Most of them we all heard of. Now, my video I did on James Brown, I already debunked one of those myths about the Latin breakdown as it relates to Give It Up, Turn It Loose. That clearly is an African theme song in the jungle. So Cologne is wrong about that. All right. Let's talk about Apache. I dealt with Apache in the video I did entitled The Origins of the Breakbeat, where I talked about Preston Epps, who was an advisor for the incredible bongo band. Those bongo that you hear in those songs, Apache and bongo rock, were influenced by Preston Epps, not a Latino, an African American who was influenced or introduced to the bongos by Africans. All right. So this is going to be the theme of my presentation today. All right. So let's talk about Shaft in Africa. This is a very interesting one. Now, you heard Charlie Rock mention Shaft in Africa. Now, according to Cologne, this also includes the Latin breakdown. Well, let's see. Johnny Pate, Shaft in Africa, a musical masterpiece. Released in 1973, Johnny Pate, Shaft in Africa is a remarkable soundtrack album by American music arranger, composer, and conductor Johnny Pate. Serving as the score for the film Shaft in Africa, this album is a fusion of funk, soul, and African rhythms that perfectly capture the essence of the movie. With the infectious beat, captivating melodies, and Pate's exceptional arrangement, Shaft in Africa remains an iconic musical masterpiece to this day. The album opens up with instantly recognizable theme song, Shaft in Africa, which sets the tone for the rest of the record. Pate's ability to seamlessly blend traditional African percussions with the familiar sound of Isaac Hayes' original Shaft theme creates a unique and enthralling experience. So where is the Latin breakdown at? You see where I'm going with this? A couple of other B-boy anthems were mentioned by Charlie Rock. Dynamic Corvettes. Funky music is the thing. That doesn't have, from what my ears tell me, any congas or any of those percussions in there. Like he said, not every B-boy anthem has that. All right? So again, what does that mean? It's not foundational. All right? You have Yellow Sunshine. All right? They're out of Philly, if I'm not mistaken. Dynamic Corvettes is out of DC. All right? Now, this is another picture of Yellow Sunshine. And I took a little picture or blew it up at the foot of one of the members. You'll see the member list. And there's a brother who plays the congas. His name is Lester Young. All right? Now, what I found was remarkable is that most of the percussionists in this period were African American. They were not Latino. So it's odd that he would make a reference to the Latin breakdown or the discaga when 99% of the percussionists, when we talk about the B-boy anthems, happen to be African American. Now, that reminds me of something. Hip hop historian, he's a YouTuber, and he uploaded this video talking about the different styles of conga playing. And something I didn't know before, but Americans developed their own style of conga playing, which is different from the Afro-Cubans. So that was very interesting because there is really no link to Latinos to us. We developed our own style, just like we created our own culture. So we get something and we make it our own. And that's what we did in reference to our music. What I'll do, I'll leave a link to that particular video so you can check the whole thing out. I found it very interesting. One of the other groups that Charlie mentioned was Babe Ruth, the song The Mexican, another B-boy anthem. Now, this group is out of England. And what you will find when there are percussionists that are in Britain, 99% of them, almost 100% of them, will be African. And this is also true with this particular group. The Nigerian percussionist, his name is Gaspar Lawal. And he's on the credits on this album, First Base, where the Mexican appears. So, like I said, you'll have either an African connection or you have an African American connection. There are no Latino connections yet, and there aren't going to be any. Let's go ahead. He also mentioned Baby Huey, Listen to Me, another African American singer. That particular cut, Listen to Me, has no congas, bongos on it as well. Purely an African American B-boy anthem. Let's go. Now we get to Jimmy Castor, and the song is Just Begun, one of the most recognizable b-boy anthems. Now this one is a little unique because this one actually has timbales in the break. But again, remember what I told you, that the percussionist, even this timbale player, happens to be Jimmy Castor himself. So we have to get away. Again, I got to remind you guys, you cannot associate an instrument with a culture, okay? Because if I apply that to salsa music, and let's look at salsa music. They have guitars, they have pianos, they have bass guitar, they have brass. Now, what if I said that is European inspired? I'm sure they would be upset with that because they want to, feel like that's their music. Why should our music be defined by an instrument? But that's what they do to us. So the mere fact that a timbale appears in the break does not mean it's Latin influence. Now, the thing about timbales, and what's his name? Tito Puente is a good example of that. Being out in the front, playing the timbales is a form of improvisation. The fact that he had a rhythm section, the percussions, the bongos, the congas, the clave set in the rhythm, that allows Tito to have the freedom to move around and just play out of the pocket, in the pocket. He has that freedom of improvisation, which comes from African American culture. It's clear of the evidence that I read that he was heavily influenced by by African American jazz musicians, like most Latino people at that time. All right, so we can't always think about an instrument like the timbales as a Latin instrument because the history of it tells a different story. Let's look at the history. All right, let's look at the history. The timbales, or the timbo, also known as the paella criolla, evolved in Cuba in the late 19th century. They are the descendants of the European timpani, or kettle drum, more specifically those that were brought over by the Italian opera companies and were used to accompany wind ensembles and military parade bands in colonial Cuba. The paella criolla evolved as a lighter, more portable alternative to the large, cumbersome kettle drum, perfect for marching and parading. These early timbales were made from iron copper containers, which were found in many of the sugar factories around the island. Creating drums out of these materials made them more accessible and affordable, causing them to spread quickly in popularity. During the early 20th century, as Cuban musicians traveled from and to the United States, the timbales became influenced by the drum set and transitioned from being constructed from the materials found on the island, from the sugarcane factories, to the metal shells we see today. So the actual timbales that we know, the modern timbale we know today, was manufactured in the United States, patterned after the drum set. Okay, so this instrument has went through different stages, so we can't even really attribute it to even one culture. So why even try to do that? Here's a picture of Jimmy Castor and the bunch. And the brother that has the congas, his name is Lenny Friddy, another African American. This is consistent theme with the musicians at that time. The percussionists at that time were not Latino. That's why I'm confused. Why do you call something Latin breakdown when there are no Latinos involved? So once again, it's clear that b-boy culture, the b-boy anthems, come from Black culture. Plain and simple. Do you hear any Latino connections at all? I don't. It's all us. All right? So I don't need to make this video that long. Listen, we got to keep doing our thing. That's all we got to keep doing. So if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Please hit that like button so many other people can see the information. We got to get the information out. We got to do our thing. All right, until the next time. Peace.